My mother-in-law tried to ruin my life with false claims. She staged a divorce behind my back, tried to use a college fund as leverage, and brought us to court, not knowing her own daughter was about to betray her. Our family was the white picket fence American wet dream. Barbecues on Sundays, homemade lemonade stands, matching family outfits, everything. My wife only had 2 boyfriends before me, and she was my first time for everything. The only caveat was my mother-in-law because I was from Turkey, and my wife was a full American. My mother-in-law was nasty to me, calling me names like camel jockey or kebab boy. Her witch-like laughter filled the air every time she said those words, as she'd giggle with her friends like it was the funniest thing in the world. And while my wife did initially try to stop her, after a while, I told her to give up because it only made things worse. Plus, I was dating Amy, not her family. So it should have been fine, right? It was this exact thinking that led me and Amy to the bright idea of inviting her family to our Sunday barbecue. It seemed harmless at first. After all, our son Mikey needed to know Amy's side a little more. Things went smoothly initially. Her dad hugged me. Her brother gave us a housewarming gift, but then came her mother. Don't worry, I brought plain hot dogs in case the food's too exotic. Her tone was so sharp it could have cut a brick in half, but I ignored it and plastered on my well-practiced Hollywood smile. Thank you, I said, giving her a big hug. I could feel her tense up, and it took everything in me not to laugh right into her ear. Everything started going okay after that. Everyone was laughing. Our plates glistened in the sun like the shell of a tortoise on a beautiful beach. Our bellies were full. But halfway through the barbecue, I noticed my mother-in-law disappeared with Amy for almost an hour. I figured she was just giving one of her "you need to divorce him" speeches, so I ignored it. By the time the barbecue was over, Mikey had received so much attention he was practically drooling with exhaustion. I knew the barbecue was a success. I still didn't expect a thank you from my mother-in-law or anything good, for that matter. However, on the way out, she exceeded my expectations. It's not too late to start over. Her tone half sarcastic with a hint of truth. I remember breathing a deep sigh of relief, thankful this nightmare was finally over. But then later on, as we were tidying up, I asked my wife what that was about. Oh, you know, the usual. I laughed because I knew that was translation for the usual BS. But instead of laughing with me, she stopped what she was doing, went completely still, and just glared. For the first time ever, I saw contempt in my wife's eyes. She looked like an angry principal giving her student a suspension. An awful gut feeling washed over me. But I reminded myself that my wife was probably super tired, and this is how it was manifesting. The next day rolled around. My wife was completely ignoring me, giving the silent treatment and acting colder than an iceberg towards me. But even that wasn't the worst part. We were watching TV in the evening, and there was a terrorist attack report. My wife turned to me and said, "You'd know all about that, wouldn't you?" Before cackling like she had just said the funniest thing in the world. Up until that point, she was the only lover in my life who hadn't weaponized my foreignness. And that was a huge part of why I felt so safe in the relationship. So, when she said that, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I went into the bathroom and teared up, though I didn't want to admit it. Her words cut me deep like a sharp knife through butter. I knew her mother had something to do with this. But when I brought this up, she shrugged and said, "I guess my humor is just developing quickly." I took a deep breath. She had never acted this way. I felt more disgusted than hurt. I ended up not seeing her much that week, not on purpose, just because she had suddenly gotten busy with work. I spent a lot of time with Mikey that week. And then one day, as I was picking him up from school, he asked if we could get Wingstop on the way home. I told him no. I had made him food at home, and it was in the fridge. He looked at me like I had just told him the most hurtful thing before suddenly blurting out, "Mom says we'll be happier when you're not here anymore." My heart dropped. I went silent, my voice tight in my throat, trying to stop myself from crying. My mind raced at 1,000,000 miles per hour. With Amy's recent behavior, things started to click. When we got back, Amy wasn't home from work yet, so I did some digging. As I climbed up the attic ladder, a cloud of dust hit my nostrils, and I coughed, a glimpse of the mountain of pain to come. As I climbed in, I noticed a box I'd never seen before. The first few documents were about some boring tax stuff, but what I saw underneath was so shocking, my eyes nearly popped out of my head. Dozens and dozens of screenshotted texts, transcribed voice memos, photos of us together, all taken grossly out of context to make me look like some evil supervillain. And at the bottom, I saw they were all signed by my mother-in-law as a witness. For example, there was a screenshot of a text I'd sent when Amy was out with friends. "Don't forget who you belong to." It was an inside joke from a movie we both loved, but the note beside it read, "Exhibits controlling behavior. Doesn't allow me freedom." A photo showed me looking angry. I was actually yelling at the TV during a football game. On the back was written, "Frequently displays rage. I fear for my safety." Every single document was signed at the bottom, witnessed by Eleanor Vance, Amy's mother. As I dug deeper, I found a draft divorce filing. The allegations were horrifying: emotional abuse, controlling behavior, even claims that I'd threatened Amy. According to these papers, I was a ticking time bomb of rage who isolated Amy from her family and friends. It was all lies, horrible, calculated lies designed to destroy me. And at the very bottom of the box, I found the most disturbing thing of all, a handwritten plan detailing how Amy would take Mikey, empty our joint accounts, and leave me with nothing, not even visitation rights with my son. I sat there in the dusty attic holding these papers, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. The wife I loved, the mother of my child, had been systematically building a case against me. And for what? So she could take everything and leave me with nothing? I heard the garage door open downstairs. Amy was home. I quickly put everything back exactly as I'd found it and climbed down the ladder, my mind racing. What was I going to do now? I quietly closed the attic hatch just as Amy walked through the door. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost lost my grip on the ladder. I'd gone from confused husband to feeling like a man on death row in the span of 30 minutes. "Hey," Amy said without looking at me, dropping her keys on the counter like she always did, except nothing felt normal anymore. Not her voice, not the way she moved, nothing. I tried to act casual. "Hey, how was work?" My voice sounded weird even to me, like I was reading from a script. "Fine." She brushed past me, and I caught that strange perfume again. She went straight to Mikey, kneeling down to give him a big hug. "Hey buddy, I missed you." Watching them, my stomach twisted into knots. Was she planning to take him away from me? According to those papers, that was exactly what she intended to do. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I mumbled something about checking the mail and stepped outside just to breathe. The evening air felt cool against my face, which was probably burning red from stress and anger. Our neighbor Linda waved from across the street while walking her dog. I waved back mechanically, wondering if our whole life was about to become neighborhood gossip. That night, I could barely sleep. Amy stayed as far away from me in bed as possible without actually falling off. I stared at the ceiling for hours, my mind racing. What had her mother said to turn Amy against me so completely? What was I going to do? The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus anyway. As soon as Amy left with Mikey for school drop-off, I went back to the attic. I took pictures of everything with my phone, making sure to document all the lies and manipulations. If this was heading where I thought it was, I'd need evidence. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, researching divorce attorneys on my laptop. I found one with good reviews named David Chun, who specialized in father's rights. I made an appointment for the next day during my lunch break. When Amy came home that evening, she seemed surprised to see me there. "I thought you were working late today," she said, sounding almost annoyed. I hadn't told her any such thing. "No. Why would you think that?" She shrugged. Must have gotten confused. More lies. She'd probably planned to do something while I was supposedly gone. I watched her closely that night, noticing how she kept checking her phone and typing with her back turned to me. The next day, I met with David. His office was small but professional, with diplomas covering one wall and family photos on his desk. I showed him the pictures I'd taken of Amy's documents and explained everything that had happened. David listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally asking questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "This is quite a situation, Karam. Based on what you've shown me, your wife and mother-in-law are building a case for a divorce where you'd lose custody and most assets." He adjusted his glasses. "The good news is you found this before they serve you papers. We have time to prepare. What should I do?" I asked, feeling completely lost. "First, don't confront your wife. Act normal. Second, secure your finances. Open a separate account at a different bank and move half your savings there. It's still marital property, but this protects you from being left with nothing. Third, document everything. Record conversations if your state allows it. Keep a journal of all interactions. I left his office with a plan and feeling slightly less terrified. On my way back to work, I stopped at a new bank and opened an account, transferring half our savings as David suggested. I felt guilty doing it, but then remembered the detailed plan to clean me out completely. This wasn't dishonesty. This was self-preservation. That weekend was torture. Amy suggested we take Mikey to the park as a family, which felt like the most twisted thing ever considering what I now knew. Still, I played along, pushing Mikey on the swings while Amy took photos on her phone. Was she documenting our last days as a family or gathering more material to use against me? I couldn't tell anymore. While Mikey played in the sandbox, Amy's phone rang. She walked away to answer it, but I could see her face light up in a way it hadn't for me in weeks. When she came back, I casually asked who called. "Just Mom checking in," she said, but her eyes didn't meet mine. That night, after Mikey went to bed, I started keeping the journal David suggested. I wrote down everything that had happened since the barbecue, trying to be as detailed as possible. It felt weird documenting the collapse of my marriage, but I needed to protect myself and, more importantly, my relationship with my son. Monday morning, I called Amy's dad. We'd always gotten along well enough, and I needed to know if he was in on this whole scheme. I asked if he could meet me for lunch, just the two of us. He sounded surprised but agreed. We met at a small diner near his office. Robert looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper. We ordered sandwiches, making small talk until they arrived. Finally, I took a deep breath and dove in. "Robert, I need to ask you something important. Has Amy talked to you about having problems in our marriage?" He put down his sandwich, looking genuinely confused. "No, not at all. Is everything okay between you two?" I studied his face. Either he was a great actor, or he truly had no idea what was happening. I decided to take a chance. I found some documents in our attic. Plans for a divorce where Amy takes everything, including Mikey. All based on lies about me being abusive. And your wife has signed as a witness to all of it. Robert's face went pale. "What? That's insane. Eleanor didn't mention anything like this to me." I showed him some of the photos on my phone. As he swiped through them, his expression changed from disbelief to something like anger. This is Eleanor's handwriting." "All right." He handed back my phone. "I had no idea, Karam. I swear. This isn't right. I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I love Amy, but she's completely changed. And the thought of losing Mikey." My voice cracked unexpectedly. Robert reached across the table and put his hand on my arm. "I'll talk to Eleanor and Amy. This has gone too far." I shook my head. "Please don't. Not yet. If they know I found these documents, who knows what they'll do next? I need to protect myself first." He nodded slowly. "I understand. But I want you to know I'm not part of this, and I don't support it. You've been a good husband and father. Whatever Eleanor has put in Amy's head, it's not right." Having Robert as an ally lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. Before we parted, he promised to keep an eye out for any more scheming without revealing what he knew. Over the next week, I continued playing the role of oblivious husband. I noticed Amy making more work calls in private and having hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I documented everything in my journal and had regular check-ins with David. Then came another bombshell. Amy's brother, Mark, texted me out of the blue. "Hey man, can we grab a beer tonight? Need to talk about something." We met at a sports bar a few towns over where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. Mark looked nervous, fidgeting with his beer coaster. "So what's up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Mark took a long swig of his beer. "Mom called me last night. She wanted me to write a statement saying I'd witnessed you being verbally abusive to Amy at family gatherings." My heart sank. And I told her she was crazy. "I've never seen you be anything but respectful to Amy. I don't know what's going on, but Mom was insistent. Said Amy's planning to leave you and needs evidence for the divorce." I filled Mark in on what I discovered. Like his father, he was completely shocked. "This is messed up, Karam. Mom's always been difficult, but this is next level. What can I do to help?" We spent the next hour making plans. Mark agreed to pretend to go along with Eleanor's request, but would actually document all her attempts to fabricate evidence against me. He'd also keep his ears open for any talk about their timeline. On the drive home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Betrayed by my wife, but touched by the support from her father and brother. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. When I got home, Amy was waiting up, arms crossed. Where were you? Just having a beer with some guys from work. I lied, hating how easily it came now. Robert's getting divorced. Needed to vent. Something flashed in her eyes. Divorce, huh? Poor guy. Yeah. I headed to the bathroom to avoid further conversation. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The stress was taking its toll. I looked tired. Older. This couldn't go on much longer. The next day, I installed a small camera in our living room. David had suggested it, and though it felt invasive, I needed to protect myself. I made sure it was legal in our state and positioned it to only capture common areas of the house. That decision paid off sooner than I expected. 2 days later, while reviewing the footage, I saw Amy and her mother in our living room while I was at work. I don't know, Mom, Amy was saying, looking unsure. This feels wrong. He's never hurt me. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Don't be naive, Amy. Men like him always show their true colors eventually. Remember what your cousin Jen went through? Better to get out now while you have the upper hand. Think about the settlement. You'll never have to work again. What about Mikey? Children are resilient. Besides, he'll be better off without that foreign influence. I watched in disbelief as Eleanor pulled out papers from her bag, the same ones I'd found in the attic. They spent the next hour adding to the fabricated evidence, with Eleanor coaching Amy on what to write. At one point, Amy looked genuinely uncomfortable, but her mother kept pushing. Just think about the beach house we could buy with his 401k money, Eleanor said, smiling. And that Turkish rug store of his brother's will be worth something, too, if we play this right. I felt sick. This wasn't just about getting me out of the picture. This was about money. Eleanor was using her own daughter in a scheme to essentially rob me and my family. I saved the video in multiple places, including sending a copy to David. He called me immediately after watching it. This is exactly what we needed, Karam. This proves the allegations are fabricated and shows coercion. But we still need to be strategic about how we use it. I agreed, though part of me wanted to confront Amy immediately. How could she do this? Was our entire marriage a sham? That night at dinner, I nearly broke when Mikey asked if we could go to Turkey next summer to visit my family. Grandma said I can't go there anymore because it's dangerous, he added innocently. Amy quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. They were already poisoning my son against his heritage, against half of who he was. I excused myself from the table before I lost my composure completely. The next day, Mark called with new information. They're planning to file next Monday. Mom's meeting with some hotshot divorce attorney tomorrow to finalize everything. This accelerated our timeline considerably. David advised me to file first using the evidence we'd gathered. If we wait for them to serve you, you'll be on the defensive from day one, he explained. We prepared all the paperwork that weekend. I felt like I was living a double life, playing board games with Mikey and making Sunday breakfast while simultaneously planning for a divorce battle. Amy continued her act, too, though I noticed moments when she seemed almost like her old self, especially around Mikey. It made me wonder how much of this was her idea versus her mother's manipulation. Monday morning, I left for work as usual, but went straight to the courthouse instead. Filing those papers was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Each signature felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I was just leaving the courthouse when my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Mom just picked up Amy from work. They're heading to their lawyer now. You beat them by hours. That afternoon, Amy was served with the divorce papers at her office. I made sure Mikey was with me, taking him straight from school to my friend John's place, where we'd arranged for him to have a play date with John's son. I didn't want him home for the inevitable confrontation. The storm hit around 6 p.m. Amy burst through the front door, her face contorted with rage. What the hell is this? She screamed, waving the papers. Divorce papers, I said calmly. I figured I'd save you the trouble of filing yourself. Her face changed from anger to confusion. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Amy. I know everything. The fake abuse claims. The plan to take everything, including Mikey. Your mother coaching you on how to set me up. She paled slightly, but rallied quickly. You're paranoid. This is exactly why I need to get away from you. Really? So, you weren't planning to file for divorce today? Your mom didn't meet with a lawyer last week. That stopped her. How did you? And I suppose you weren't building a case against me with fabricated evidence that your mother witnessed? Evidence that's conveniently stored in our attic. Amy sank onto the couch, her bravado evaporating. You found the box. I did. And I have video of you and your mother creating false evidence. What were you thinking, Amy? Was our whole marriage a lie? She looked up, tears in her eyes. No, I loved you. I still do, in a way. But Mom said. Mom said what? That I'd eventually become abusive because I'm Turkish? That you could take me for everything I have? That my family business was worth targeting? The anger I'd been suppressing for weeks finally broke through. Amy's tears flowed freely now. She kept saying you were going to hurt me eventually. That meant like you always do. She had all these statistics about domestic violence in Middle Eastern cultures. And then she started talking about how much money I could get. And you believed her? After 6 years together. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. She shook her head. Not at first. But she was so persistent. Every day, more articles, more horror stories. She even had this friend whose daughter married someone from Iran, and he supposedly became this monster after they had kids. So, because some random person's daughter had a bad marriage, ours was doomed? That's racist, Amy. Plain and simple. She flinched at the word. I know it is. I started to realize that a few days ago, but by then things had gone so far. Mom had already paid the lawyer. I sat across from her, maintaining distance. Where's Mikey? With John. I didn't want him here for this. Amy nodded, looking relieved. Then her phone rang. Eleanor calling. Amy stared at it for a moment before declining the call. What happens now? She asked quietly. That depends. The papers I filed request joint custody and a fair division of assets. No false abuse claims, no attempt to destroy each other. But I can't just pretend this didn't happen, Amy. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. Her phone kept buzzing with texts from Eleanor. Amy finally turned it off completely. I don't know if I want a divorce, she whispered. These past few weeks, I felt like I was losing my mind. Mom was always there, pushing and pushing. But when I'm alone, I miss you. The real you, not the monster she painted. I wasn't expecting that. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but the trust was broken. I don't know if our marriage can recover from this, I admitted. But I do know that your mother can never have this kind of influence in our lives again. Amy looked up sharply. You want me to cut off my mother? I want you to recognize how toxic she is. She nearly destroyed our family for money and her own prejudice. We talked for hours that night. A painful, honest conversation about how we'd gotten here. Amy admitted she'd been feeling distant from her identity. Living in our neighborhood, surrounded by my large extended family, Eleanor had exploited that vulnerability. But that doesn't excuse what I did, Amy said finally. I should have talked to you instead of plotting behind your back. By the time I picked up Mikey from John's, it was nearly midnight. Amy and I had reached a tentative truce. We'd go to counseling, both marriage counseling and individual therapy for Amy to work through her relationship with her mother. In the meantime, Eleanor would not be welcome in our home. The next few days were awkward but oddly hopeful. Amy moved into the guest room, giving us space while we figured things out. She called in sick to work and spent a day removing all the evidence from the attic, breaking down in tears several times as she realized the magnitude of what she'd almost done. Eleanor, meanwhile, was on the warpath. She called constantly, showed up at our door, we didn't answer, and even tried to contact Mikey's school. I documented everything just in case. Then came the confrontation we couldn't avoid. Robert and Mark arranged a family meeting at their house, excluding Eleanor. When we arrived, I was surprised to see Amy's sister, Quinn, there too, having flown in from Seattle. We sat around Robert's dining table, the tension thick enough to cut. I explained everything, showing them the video evidence. Quinn looked horrified. Mom tried to get me involved, too, she admitted. Called last month asking if I'd ever seen Karam lose his temper. I told her she was being ridiculous. Robert cleared his throat. I've spoken with Eleanor. She admits to encouraging the divorce, but claims she was just protecting Amy. I don't believe her. He looked at me directly. I'm sorry, Karam. This should never have happened. Amy was quietly crying beside me, not the manipulative tears I'd seen recently, but genuine remorse. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the tears. I made a terrible mistake. I let Mom's prejudice and greed cloud my judgment, and I nearly destroyed my family. She turned to me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am truly sorry. Mark leaned forward. The question is, what now? Mom's not going to just back off. She has to, Robert said firmly. I've made that clear to her. This ends now, or there will be consequences. Quinn nodded. We're with you, Karam. Whatever you decide about your marriage, You'll always be Mikey's father and part of this family. The support from Amy's family was overwhelming. After years of feeling like an outsider, I was finally being accepted, ironically, just as my marriage was on the rocks. We left with a lot to think about. On the drive home, Amy asked, "Do you think we can ever get past this?" I gripped the steering wheel tightly. I honestly don't know. But for Mikey's sake, I'm willing to try. The road to rebuilding trust would be long. There were moments in the following weeks when I'd catch Amy looking at her phone and wonder if she was talking to Eleanor. There were nights I'd wake up in a cold sweat, wondering if this was all an elaborate act. But there were good moments, too. Amy found a therapist who specialized in toxic family relationships. She started reconnecting with my family, making an effort to learn Turkish cooking from my mother. Most importantly, she stood firm against Eleanor's continued attempts to interfere. The turning point came a month after the confrontation. Eleanor showed up at our house unannounced, pushing her way in when Amy answered the door. "This has gone on long enough," she announced. "I've spoken with another attorney. We can still file with the evidence we gathered." I was upstairs but heard every word through the camera I'd installed in the living room. I waited, heart pounding, to hear Amy's response. "There is no we, Mom," Amy said clearly. "What we did was wrong. Karam is a good man and a wonderful father. Your prejudice nearly cost me my family." "Don't be dramatic," Eleanor scoffed. "Men like him always." "Stop." Amy's voice was stronger than I'd heard in months. "If you can't respect my husband and the father of my child, then you need to leave. And don't come back until you can treat him with dignity." From my hiding spot at the top of the stairs, I heard the front door open. "This isn't over," Eleanor hissed. "Yes, it is," Amy replied, closing the door firmly. I waited a few minutes before coming downstairs. Amy was sitting on the couch, looking drained but somehow lighter. "You heard?" she asked. I nodded, sitting beside her. "Thank you." She took my hand cautiously. "I meant every word. I've been so blind, Karam. I can't believe I almost threw away everything that matters for." "For what? Money? My mother's approval." That night, we talked about possibly dismissing the divorce filing. It wouldn't be easy, and we had a lot of work to do. But for the first time since finding those documents in the attic, I felt like maybe, just maybe, our family could heal. That night was the first time in weeks that I genuinely started to believe we might get through this. I didn't know if our marriage would ever be the same, but seeing Amy stand up to her mom like that was huge. Maybe there was still something worth saving here. The next morning, Amy suggested we take Mikey to the park together. It felt awkward at first, like we were playing pretend family for our son's benefit. But watching Mikey run around the playground, laughing and carefree, I remembered why we were trying so hard to fix things. "He looks happy," Amy said, sitting beside me on the bench. "Yeah," I agreed. "Kids are pretty resilient." "Do you think he knows something's wrong between us?" I shrugged. "Kids pick up on more than we think, but I'm trying my best to keep things normal for him." Amy nodded, watching Mikey climb the monkey bars. "Me too. That's why I need to tell you something." My stomach instantly tightened. "Here we go again. What is it?" "Mom's planning something. Mark called me last night after you went to bed. She's been meeting with another lawyer, someone really aggressive who specializes in high-conflict divorces." I sighed heavily. Of course, Eleanor wouldn't give up that easily. "What does that mean for us?" "I don't know exactly, but Mark thinks she's going to try to force my hand somehow. Maybe threaten to cut me off financially or something." Amy hesitated. "I know that shouldn't matter, but your parents have always helped you out." I finished for her. Amy's family was pretty well off, and they'd given us our down payment and helped with Mikey's private school tuition. "I'm not saying I'd choose money over our family," Amy added quickly. "I just wanted you to know what we might be up against." I appreciated the honesty, at least. "Thanks for telling me." We didn't get much time to discuss it further because Mikey came running over, demanding we watch him go down the big slide. For the rest of the afternoon, we put aside our problems and focused on being parents. That evening, after Mikey went to bed, I called David to update him on the situation. He wasn't surprised about Eleanor hiring a new lawyer. "People like her don't back down easily," he said. "But her standing is weak now. You have evidence of the fabricated abuse claims, and Amy isn't cooperating with her anymore. So what should we do?" I asked. "Stay the course. Keep documenting everything. If you and Amy are really trying to reconcile, we can file to dismiss the divorce petition, but I'd wait a bit longer to make sure things are stable." I agreed with his advice. Trust wasn't going to be rebuilt overnight. The next week was relatively calm. Amy and I started couples therapy with a counselor named Dr. Quinn, no relation to Amy's sister. Our first session was tough, involving lots of tears and painful truths. I admitted how betrayed I felt, and Amy talked about how she'd let her mother manipulate her insecurities about our cultural differences. I was always a little intimidated by your family, she confessed during our second session. Everyone speaking Turkish at gatherings. All the traditions I didn't understand. I sometimes felt like an outsider. You never told me that, I said, genuinely surprised. I didn't want to seem ignorant or racist. But Mom used that. She kept telling me I was losing my identity, that Mikey was becoming more Turkish than American. Dr. Quinn helped us see how we both contributed to the problem, me by not noticing Amy's discomfort and Amy by not communicating her feelings. It wasn't an excuse for what she'd done, but it helped me understand how Eleanor had found a crack to exploit. Things at home slowly improved. Amy moved back into our bedroom. Though we weren't intimate yet, we were careful with each other, like handling something fragile that might break if we moved too quickly. Then, Eleanor made her move. I came home from work on Thursday to find Amy sitting at the kitchen table, looking pale. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held a thick envelope. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down my laptop bag. "Mom sent this." She pushed the envelope toward me. "It's a trust fund document. Apparently, they set up a college fund for Mikey when he was born. Almost $200,000 now." I skimmed through the paperwork. "Okay, and there's a condition. The money can only be accessed if Mikey is living primarily with me or my parents. If we stay married or if we share custody, the money goes to charity instead." I felt that familiar anger bubbling up. She's using Mikey's education as leverage. Amy nodded miserably. "There's a letter, too." She handed me a cream-colored stationery note in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. The letter was everything you'd expect from Eleanor. Fake concern about Amy's well-being, thinly veiled racist comments about my family's influence, and a clear ultimatum. Leave me and get the money, or stay, and Mikey would suffer. "What do you want to do?" I asked carefully. Amy looked up, her eyes red but determined. "I already called Dad. He had no idea about these conditions on the trust. He's furious with Mom." "That doesn't answer my question," I pressed. "I'm not choosing money over our family, Karam. Not again. I made that mistake once, and I'm still trying to fix it." She took a deep breath. "But I wanted to be honest with you about everything. No more secrets." I believed her. For the first time in weeks, I really believed her. The next day, Robert called me directly. "I'm sorting out this trust fund nonsense," he said, sounding angrier than I'd ever heard him. "Eleanor had no right to add those conditions without consulting me." "I appreciate that," I said. "But honestly, it's not about the money." "I know that," he replied. "But it's the principle. She's trying to buy our grandson's future. I won't stand for it." Robert asked to come over that weekend to talk with both of us. When he arrived on Saturday, he brought a file of his own. "I've spoken with our family attorney," he explained as we sat in the living room. "The trust as Eleanor presented it isn't legally binding. I never signed off on those conditions." Amy looked relieved. "So, the money is still there for Mikey's education?" "Yes, regardless of your marital status or custody arrangement." Robert hesitated. "But there's something else you should know. I've been doing some digging into our finances after all this came to light." He opened the file and showed U.S. bank statements and transfer records. Eleanor has been moving money around for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. "Where was it going?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "To a separate account in her name only. Almost $100,000 so far." He looked at Amy. "I think she was planning to fund your divorce and new life without telling me." Amy covered her face with her hands. "Oh my God, I've frozen the accounts for now," Robert continued. "But I wanted you both to know what's been happening." After Robert left, Amy was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so ashamed. My own mother was stealing from my father to fund this insane plan." I sat beside her on the couch. "It's not your fault. Part of it is. I let her convince me you were the villain when she was the one manipulating everyone." She wiped her eyes. "I need to tell you something else. Something I haven't admitted yet." My heart raced. "What is it?" "When Mom first started talking about divorce, I didn't take it seriously. But then she introduced me to this friend of hers, Linda. Linda told me this horrible story about her daughter who married a man from Jordan. How he seemed perfect at first, but became controlling and eventually violent. And you thought that would happen with me? I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. No, that's just it. I didn't believe it would happen with you. But Mom kept pushing. And then, she trailed off. Then what? Then I found out Linda doesn't even have a daughter. Mark discovered it by accident when he was looking into Mom's friends. Linda was an actress Mom hired to tell this story. Amy's voice broke. My own mother paid someone to lie to me about an abusive foreign husband to convince me to leave you. I was speechless. The lengths Eleanor had gone to were staggering. I wanted you to know everything, Amy said quietly. Even the parts that make me look gullible and stupid. I took her hand. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something. Thank you for telling me. The next few days were a strange mix of progress and tension. Amy and I were communicating better than we had in months, but the stress of Eleanor's ongoing schemes was taking a toll. We agreed to go ahead with dismissing the divorce petition, which felt like a huge step forward. Then, without warning, Eleanor showed up at Mikey's school. I got the call from the principal while I was at work. Mr. Dare, we had an incident today. Your mother-in-law attempted to pick up Mikey without authorization. My blood ran cold. Is Mikey okay? He's fine. Our staff followed protocol and refused to release him, but Mrs. Vance became quite agitated. We had to ask her to leave the premises. I called Amy immediately, and we both left work to go to the school. Mikey was in the principal's office, looking confused but otherwise okay. Grandma came to school, he told us. She said we were going on a special trip, but Mrs. Davis wouldn't let me go. Amy knelt down to his level. Grandma didn't tell us about any trip, buddy. You did the right thing by staying with your teacher. On the way home, Amy was shaking with anger. She tried to take our son without permission. I know, I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. This has gone too far, Karam. We need to do something. I agreed. That night, after Mikey was asleep, we called Robert and Mark to fill them in. Robert was devastated. I don't recognize who Eleanor has become, he said. First the money, now this. Mark was more practical. You need a restraining order. That feels extreme, Amy said, though I could tell she was considering it. She tried to take Mikey from school without permission, Mark reminded her. What if she succeeds next time? The next morning, we met with David again. He agreed a restraining order was appropriate given Eleanor's escalating behavior. We filed the paperwork that day, requesting she stay away from our home, Mikey's school, and our workplaces. The temporary order was granted quickly, but Eleanor would have a chance to contest it at a hearing in 2 weeks. David warned us it would be rough. She'll likely bring up the abuse allegations again, he cautioned. Even though we have evidence they were fabricated, be prepared for some ugly accusations. Those 2 weeks were tense. We updated Mikey's school with the restraining order details and added extra security measures at home. Amy was a nervous wreck, torn between protecting our family and facing the reality of taking legal action against her own mother. Eleanor, meanwhile, went on the offensive. She called every family member, telling them I was manipulating Amy and turning her against her own mother. Most saw through it, especially after Mark shared what we knew, but a few distant relatives took Eleanor's side. The day of the hearing arrived. Amy and I dropped Mikey off with my brother, Amit, who promised to keep him distracted with a trip to the aquarium. As we walked into the courthouse, Amy squeezed my hand. Whatever happens in there, we're in this together, she said. Eleanor was already inside with her attorney, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. She didn't acknowledge us, but I could feel her glaring from across the room. The hearing was everything David had warned us about. Eleanor's lawyer painted me as a controlling, potentially violent husband who had somehow brainwashed Amy into recanting her abuse claims. They brought up every stereotype about Middle Eastern men they could think of, barely disguising their racism as concern. When it was our turn, David calmly presented the evidence we'd gathered. The video of Eleanor coaching Amy to create false allegations, the financial records showing Eleanor's misappropriation of funds, the statement from Mikey's school about the unauthorized pickup attempt. The judge, a no-nonsense older woman named Judge Thornton, listened carefully to both sides. When all evidence was presented, she addressed Eleanor directly. Mrs. Vance, the evidence suggests you have engaged in a pattern of deception and manipulation aimed at destroying your daughter's marriage for reasons that appear to be primarily rooted in prejudice. Her tone was stern. Furthermore, Your attempt to remove your grandson from school without parental permission is extremely concerning." Eleanor tried to interrupt, but Judge Thornton silenced her with a look. "The restraining order is granted for a period of 1 year. You are to remain at least 500 feet from your daughter, her husband, their child, their home, workplaces, and the child's school. Any violation will result in immediate consequences." She turned to us. "Mr. and Mrs. Dare, I suggest you pursue family counseling to address the damage this situation has caused." As we left the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The restraining order would protect us, but the fact that we needed it at all was heartbreaking, especially for Amy. "Are you okay?" I asked her as we walked to the car. She nodded slowly. "I think so. It feels like the end of something, but maybe also the beginning of something better." Over the next few months, our lives gradually stabilized. With Eleanor legally required to stay away, we could focus on rebuilding our family without her interference. Amy continued her individual therapy, working through the complex emotions of essentially losing her mother while saving her marriage. Robert filed for divorce from Eleanor, unable to forgive her financial deception and the lengths she'd gone to manipulate their daughter. He became a regular visitor at our house, rebuilding his relationship with Mikey and, somewhat surprisingly, developing a friendship with my father when my parents visited from Turkey. 6 months after the hearing, Amy and I renewed our vows in a small ceremony in our backyard. Nothing fancy, just close friends and family celebrating the fact that we'd weathered the storm. My brother Amit brought his famous kebabs, Mark handled the music, and Quinn decorated everything beautifully. During the ceremony, Amy added her own surprise vow in halting, but carefully practiced Turkish. The effort she'd put into learning those few sentences in my native language moved me more than anything else could have. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Mikey was asleep, Amy and I sat on our back porch looking at the stars. "Do you think we'll ever completely get past this?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. I don't know if get past is the right way to think about it. It happened. It changed us. But maybe it also made us stronger in some ways. Amy leaned her head against my shoulder. "I'm still sorry." "I know," I said, "but I'm not looking backward anymore." And I meant it. The trust wasn't completely rebuilt yet, and maybe it never would be 100% what it was before, but Mikey was happy. Amy and I were working through our issues, and for the first time in a long time, our future looked bright. Eleanor eventually moved to Florida after her divorce from Robert was finalized. We heard through Mark that she'd joined some kind of community for parents estranged from their ungrateful children. Apparently, she'd found plenty of like-minded people who refused to acknowledge their own toxic behavior. We maintained the restraining order when it came up for renewal, though Eleanor had made no attempts to contact us directly. Sometimes I caught Amy looking sad when Mother's Day advertisements appeared or when Mikey occasionally asked about his other grandmother. Those moments were hard, but they became less frequent with time. The most unexpected outcome of the whole ordeal was how much closer I became with Amy's father and siblings. Robert often joined us for Sunday dinners. Mark became my regular golf buddy, and Quinn moved back from Seattle to be closer to family, becoming Mikey's favorite aunt. As for me and Amy, we weren't perfect, but we were working on it. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, Amy found an old photo of us from when we were dating, young and carefree, standing in front of my parents' restaurant in Turkey during her first visit there. "We look so happy," she said wistfully. "We were," I replied, looking over her shoulder at the photo. "And we will be again." She turned to face me, her expression serious. "I almost threw this away. All of it. For what? My mother's approval? Money?" I shook my head. "It doesn't matter anymore. You didn't throw it away. That's what counts." And as I held my wife in my arms that night, I knew we'd be okay. Not because everything was magically fixed or because we'd forgotten what happened, but because we'd both chosen to fight for our family when it would have been easier to walk away.